These are assembly instructions to my box with a rising card. In front of me I have the panels that are going to decorate the outside of my box, and I have 2 layers for each panel for the outside. I have some patterned cardstock on top of some white shimmer cardstock. These 2 are for the top of the box, these 4 are for the sides of the box, and I have an additional panel for the bottom of my box. So I'm just going to glue all 7 of these panels down on their base layers, trying to keep an even border on all 4 sides for each panel. And for my top panels, I just want to make sure that the circular cutout is right over the circular cutout of my base layer. So now that I've assembled my decorative panels for the outside of my box, I'm going to start assembling my box. So I have the main part that is the base of my box. I have 2 pieces that have rectangular cutouts in one panel of them. And then I have 2 smaller pieces with the same cutouts, but also have a circular cutout. And then I have this one piece that has 2 score lines in the center of it. And then I have this one panel that just has a score line at the bottom of it. I'm folding down on that score line to create a tab. And then I'm going to fold down on all the score lines for the biggest part of my box piece. So now I'm looking at the inside of my box. So this would be the bottom of my box. And then I'm taking that smaller piece and I'm putting glue from the score line to the edge on the tab. And I am placing it between the score lines that are on the bottom of my box. And I want to make sure that the score line of that tab is right up against the cut edge of my box piece. So next I have these 2 panels, the ones that have the tiny little holes at the bottom. I'm folding on the score lines for both of them. So I'm covering the tabs with glue from the score line to the end. And I'm positioning my panels so the score line of the tab is right along the cut edge of one of my side pieces. So I've done this for the right side. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the left-hand side. And then I have my panels for the inside. I've just dry fit the one that goes for the bottom. I'm gluing in the 2 larger panels for the sides and the 2 panels at the end. And I have some pen markings in the center of the one that's at the bottom. I'm just gluing that one in, trying to center it as best I can on the bottom of my box. And then I'm gluing down the longer sides of my box, again trying to center them within the score lines. I'm leaving these 2 blank for now, and then I'm gluing down the 2 with all the cutouts, trying to center them over the cutouts that are on my base panel. So I'm doing that for the right and for the left. So these are cut out of 110-pound cardstock because I wanted something nice and thick to make my box a little bit sturdier. So next I'm going to flip my box over, so I'm looking at the outside of my box, and I have the panels for the outside. So my pattern cardstock is directional, so there's a top and a bottom. So the bottom panel doesn't really matter. I've got the bottom of my houses facing towards the interior of my box. So I'm just going to glue all of those down. The 2 panels that belong here will not get glued down yet, but I am going to glue down the rest of them within the score lines that are on the base of my box. I'm flipping my box over again, so I'm looking at the interior of it. And I have some decorative panels that look very similar, but the difference between them is that 2 of them have little circular cutouts in them. So these are going to go here and here. So I'm just going to glue those panels down. And then I'm going to fold in the 2 tabs that are furthest away from me. And I'm putting glue from the score line to the edge on both tabs. I'm raising up that side and then bringing up the 2 shorter sides, and I want the cut edge of the short side to be right along the score line of the tab where I've just put glue. And I'm doing that on both sides, and I'm just going in there with my bone folder and I'm spreading that glue. And then I have the 2 tabs that are closer to me. I'm folding them over and putting glue all over them, and then I'm tucking them inside my box and raising up that front panel, and I want the cut edge of my short side to be right along the score line of the tab where I've just put glue, and I want that on both the right and the left. And as I glue every panel down, I like to go in there and just put a little bit of pressure to make sure that my tabs stay put. So then I have those two pieces that I had put aside earlier, and they fit in the interior of the box on those shorter sides. So I'm just covering them in glue, and I'm carefully sliding them into my box, and I'm trying to center them as best I can within my box. And I'm doing that with both sides. So next I'm moving on to the panels that go inside my box. These pieces create the mechanism that is going to cause my box to rise. I'm looking at the right side of this panel, and I folded up each side on the score line, so I have a very narrow strip at the bottom, like so. And then I have the two panels for either side of this piece. I'm just folding down on the score lines for them. So I've got the right side of all three panels facing upwards. I'm putting glue on this tab from the score line to the end. I'm gluing the cut edge of my centerpiece to the score line on that tab, and the top and the bottom should be nice and even. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, putting glue on that tab and gluing it into place. And then I have two decorative panels. Now these cutouts look like they're centered, but they're not quite centered, so make sure that you're choosing the right way. If I place my panels so there's an even border on all sides, it's perfectly over the cutouts. But if I flip it over and try to glue it down the other way, it's going to go over the score line. So just make sure that you have them in the right direction. So I'm putting this aside for now. So next I'm building the little box that pops up in the center. I'm folding down on all the score lines for it. So I'm looking at the interior of my box. So I folded over the two sides, and I'm putting glue on the two tabs that are at the bottom and the two tabs that run along each side. I'm tucking those little tabs so that they're perpendicular with the sides, and then I'm lifting up the panel that's at the front. I'm gluing in my sides. I want the cut edge of the side of my box to be right along the score line of the tab, and I want the tab at the bottom folded in. And then I'm going in with my bone folder, and I'm applying a little bit of pressure at the bottom to make sure that those tabs stick down. I could have glued these in place before I built my piece. Sometimes it's better to do it while they're flat. My base piece is cut out of patterned cardstock, and I am using a little bit of foil cardstock to embellish the edges. I'm going to do that on both sides. So next I have my card. It's a very simple little card cut out of 110-pound cardstock. I have the same pattern cardstock for the layers on my card, and then I have some vinyl with my sentiment. And so that's just going to fit inside my box like so. I have a gift card here, and the gift card does fit. So if you want to put a gift card inside, it's a really handy way of giving a gift card that looks more substantial than just an envelope. So next I'm cutting two pieces of ribbon. I'm going to cut it at 15 inches, and I'm cutting it at an angle like so, and I need two of them. I'm going to flip my piece over, so I'm just threading my ribbon pieces through the cutouts that are in the center of my panel. My ribbons have more or less the same on the right and on the left, and then I'm going to thread my ribbons through the cutouts that are on the right hand side and through the cutouts that are on my left hand side. Now I'm going to flip my piece over again. I'm going to put some clips on the ends of my ribbons because I don't want them falling through the holes as I am trying to glue this piece in. Now if you don't have any clips like this, you could always use some green tape and just temporarily adhere your ribbons together like that so they don't fall through the cutouts. But I'm going to use my fancy little clips. I'm going to start on the left hand side, and I'm putting glue all over the panel that's on my left, covering it with glue, and then I'm lowering that panel right into my box. I'm pushing it down as far as it'll go, and then just gluing it to the interior of my box. So that panel is right at the bottom of my box. And then I've got that section in the center, and I have some pen markings in the center of my panel. I'm putting glue all over the center part of that insert, and I'm lowering my piece so I can see my pen lines, and I'm just making sure that that inside piece is glued down between the pen lines that are on my base. And then I'm covering that last panel of my insert with glue, so it's the panel that's on the right, and then I am inserting it inside my box and pushing it down so that that panel where I just put glue has hit the bottom of my box, and I'm gluing that piece to the side of my box. So next I'm going to temporarily close the lid of my box. I'm taking some red line tape. I want something nice and sticky. I'm putting a piece of red line tape from just the edge of that cutout to about 1 inch long. And I'm doing that for all 4 cutouts. I want that red line tape to be as centered as possible on the cutout. And I'm going to rotate my box and do that with the 2 others as well. So I have my 4 pieces of red line tape. I'm opening my box again, and I'm going to take the ribbons on my left hand side, and I'm threading them through the cutouts that are on the panel that's on my left hand side. Next, I'm removing the liner from the red line tape, and I'm positioning the end of my ribbon right over the red line tape. So I'm centering my ribbon in the cutout, and then I'm folding it over and laying the end of my ribbon over my red line tape like so. And then I'm going to add another piece of red line tape on top of my ribbon from that cutout right to the end of my ribbon. And I'm doing that for both ends. And then I'm opening that flap and I'm pulling my ribbon so that it's taut. And then I am removing my clips and threading my ribbon through the panel that's on my right hand side. I'm folding my lid over. I've got my ribbon out of the way, and I'm removing the liner on my red line tape. I'm opening my box again. I'm making sure that my ribbon is nice and taut. I'm going to flip it over, and then I'm positioning my ribbon on top of my red line tape, and I'm snipping off the excess. So originally I had 15 inches, and I am snipping off about 3 inches. So really we only needed a little over 12 inches of ribbon. Having that little bit extra made it actually easier to work with. And then I'm covering my ribbon on the right hand side with red line tape, just as I did for the left. I'm removing the liner that's on the red line tape that's on top of my ribbon. And then I'm taking my decorated panel, putting glue all over it. Before I glue it down, I'm making sure that I'm matching up the hole that's in the center of my panels. I've got that hole in the decorative panel and in my base. And I just want to make sure that there's an even border on all 4 sides, and I'm gluing that down. And I'm going to do that on the other side as well. Removing the liner on my red line tape, putting glue on the underside of my decorated panel, and then positioning my panel as straight as possible over the hole. Then I'm using these little rounded gold brads. So these are off Amazon, and then I'm inserting it in the hole, and then I'm opening up my brad on the interior, pushing my brad through all 3 layers, and I'm doing that on both sides. So next I have these 2 oval pieces, and I'm covering the underside of them in red line tape. And these are just to cover my brads. I'm removing the liner on my red line tape, and then just gluing them down on top of my brads like so. And then I'm putting my card in the center and closing my box. And so from the outside, it just looks like a little box with a split top. And then when you pull on it, then your card just pops out of the center like so.